They would teach them the meaning of a promise. Admiral Ava Rostova stood on the command deck of the Terran Confederation ship, reckoning her form, a still shadow against the nebula's violet glare. Before her, the main holotank projected the serene blue sphere of Kepler 186f prime, a world held hostage. Encircling it was a thorny crown of warships, the Cathar Imperium's Second Fleet, their hulls the color of dried blood. Centered in the tactical display, a crimson overlay pulsed with agonizing slowness, each beat a second lost. The message, stripped of all diplomatic language, burned in the air: surrender the asylum seekers. Compliance is your only salvation. A timer beneath it read 07-15-42-11. Her tactical officer, Commander Jin Kato, stood rigid at his station, his knuckles white where he gripped the console's edge. They haven't hailed us again, Admiral. They're letting the clock do the talking. He spoke with a clipped precision that failed to conceal his fury. The ultimatum was not just a threat. It was a doctrine, a tool of terror the Cathar had used to shatter a dozen nascent civilizations. They believe silence is a weapon. Rostova replied, her voice calm but resonant with the low hum of the ship's inertial dampeners. They assume we are weighing the value of a few thousand refugees against millions of colonists. She turned her head slightly, her gaze falling upon the Fleet Mind's holographic avatar shimmering beside her command chair, a pillar of pure white light that contracted and expanded with the rhythm of its logic cycles. Solon refreshed the calculus. The light pillar pulsed. The probability of the Cathar prefect Valerius adhering to his ultimatum remains 98.7%. The AI's voice stated, a synthesized baritone devoid of emotion, but sharp with data. Upon timer expiration, kinetic bombardment of designated population centers is the doctrinally mandated outcome. Our own forces are outnumbered 3-1 and outmassed 5-1. A direct engagement results in our fleet's annihilation with 100% certainty. A direct assault is a guarantee of failure. Kato's jaw tightened. So we do nothing. We just watch them glass a world because our hands are tied by a cold equation. His frustration was a palpable force in the quiet tension of the bridge, a stark contrast to the coolant's gentle hiss in the bulkheads. Calculation is not paralysis, Commander Rostova corrected, turning fully to face him. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, held no fear, only a focused intensity. It is the foundation of a better response. We will not meet their doctrine on its terms. We will teach them the cost of it on ours. She gestured to the tactical display. The ledger is open. It's time to make an entry. From a small observation lounge tucked deep within the civilian sector of the orbital station tethered to Kepler 186f prime, a young Alara watched the silent stars. She held a small data slate, its screen displaying a crude drawing of a ship with wide protective wings. Her father, a refugee engineer who had helped design solar sails back on their conquered homeworld, knelt beside her and pointed a trembling finger toward the void. See that light just there, he whispered, his breath fogging the thick plasteel. That's the reckoning. They are here for us. Alara looked from the distant star of the human flagship to the jagged crimson icons of the Cathar fleet. She did not understand ultimatums or doctrines only, the quiet fear in her father's eyes and the warmth of his hand on her shoulder. He was trying to give her hope, a fragile shield against the terrifying silence of the countdown clock, displayed on a public monitor across the lounge. Back on the Reckoning's bridge, Lieutenant Anya Sharma's fingers danced across her console, her brow furrowed in concentration. Admiral, I'm digging into the intermittent energy fluctuations Solon flagged from their blockade line. They're faint, almost lost in the background radiation of the system's star. The air around her station smelled faintly of ozone, a byproduct of her overtaxed sensor relays. Almost is not nothing, Lieutenant Rostova encouraged, stepping closer. What have you found? It's their main weapon capacitors, Sharma reported, her voice rising with the thrill of discovery. The Caithar boast about their overwhelm energy cannons capable of cracking a moon. But according to these readings, the recharge cycle is significantly longer than their official specifications suggest. They are hiding a vulnerability in their power distribution network. A single crack can bring down a mountain. Solon's avatar pulsed, a 14% longer recharge duration. This revises engagement probabilities. A synchronized alpha strike from our fleet could theoretically disable a capital ship if we survive the initial volley. The AI's tone remained flat, but the new data shifted the air on the bridge. Despair was giving way to the sharp, clean edge of opportunity. Theoretically isn't good enough, Rostova countered. We aren't trading our ships for theirs. We are saving a planet. Commander Kato, what is the status of the convoy? Kato tapped a control, and a new set of icons appeared in the holotank, a cluster of bulky, slow-moving freighters. The civilian convoy, Mercy's Run, is assembled and shielded, Admiral. Its captains have volunteered. They're carrying vital medical supplies and atmospheric processors, a legitimate humanitarian mission. The deck plates vibrated slightly as the ship's primary fusion reactor adjusted its output, preparing for maneuvers. A mission the Caithar will interpret as defiance, Rostova finished, which is precisely the point. She looked from Kato to Sharma. We are going to give them a target they cannot resist, and we are going to do it when their guns are cold. Solon, plot an approach vector for the convoy that forces the western flank of their blockade to respond. Lieutenant, prepare the mirror lattice. Anya Sharma's eyes lit up. The mirror lattice was a new, untested piece of human ingenuity, a swarm of thousands of fist-sized drones that could project hard-light duplicates of friendly ships, creating a ghost fleet to overwhelm enemy sensors. More than that, they could form a cohesive energy shield, catching and diffusing a portion of incoming fire. It was a system built not for destruction, but for deception and survival. They would not break the wall. They would make it a mirage. Prefect Valerius is hailing us, the communications officer announced, his voice tight. On the main screen, the image of the Caithar commander appeared. He was a creature of sharp angles and arrogant posture, his face a mask of condescending pity. Admiral Rostova, he began, his voice a low growl. Your silence has been your only wise decision thus far. The clock is your last advisor. Heed its counsel. The lives of millions rest upon your flexibility. Rostova met his gaze without flinching. Prefect, my fleet operates under a simple charter. We defend sovereign worlds and we protect civilian lives. Your ultimatum requires me to violate both. Therefore, it is you who must be flexible. Valerius let out a dry, rasping laugh. Your charter is a child's fairy tale, a weakness you present as a virtue. You have no military solution. You have no leverage. You have only a choice between sacrifice and sentiment. The console beside Rostova's chair gave off a low chime, a subtle alert from Solon. The capacitor fluctuations on the Caithar ships had just stabilized. They were fully charged. You've mistaken our character for our strategy, Rostova said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Your lesson is about to begin. She cut the transmission before Valerius could reply, the screen snapping back to the cold, tactical reality of the blockade. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the life support systems. You cannot negotiate with a hammer. Solon confirmed the window she commanded. The western flank's capital ship, the Blade of Judgment, has completed its charge cycle, the AI reported. Based on its current energy expenditure for station keeping and shields, it cannot fire its primary weapon and maintain blockade integrity for another 90 minutes without a significant power shunt. That is our window. Rostova nodded, the plan solidifying in her mind. It was a gamble, a colossal one resting on a few faint energy readings and a piece of untested technology. But it was a human gamble, one that chose ingenuity over brute force, hope over despair. Commander Kato, signal the convoy. Launch on my mark. Aye. Admiral Kato replied, a grim smile finally touching his lips. He understood now. This wasn't about punching a hole. It was about making the Kithar punch themselves. Lieutenant Sharma Rostova continued, her attention fixed on the shimmering holotank. Deploy the lattice. Let's give Prefect Valerius something to reflect on. A civilian captain should never have to calculate an acceptable loss. On the bridge of the lead freighter, the Stardust drifter Captain Eva Rostova watched the human flagship, the TCS Reckoning, through his main viewport. His name was Kalen, a grizzled veteran of a dozen trade routes, now turned into a linchpin of a military gambit. He ran a hand over his worn console, feeling the familiar thrum of his ship's engines. His daughter's smiling face was taped to the corner of the screen, a small faded photograph. He had recorded a message for her just an hour ago, telling her he was on a special delivery, the most important one of his life. He keyed his comms. All ships in Mercy's Run, this is Kalen. You know the mission. We are the shield for the innocent. We are the proof that we do not abandon our own. Fly steady, fly true. A chorus of affirmations came back, the voices of ordinary men and women, rising to an extraordinary challenge. They were not warriors, but they were about to fly into the teeth of a predator. The order came from the Reckoning. Mark. With a synchronized roar of engines, the convoy pushed forward, accelerating toward the Kithar line. Seconds later, a wave of silver specks erupted from the human warships, spreading out like a blossoming flower. The mirror lattice drones activated, and suddenly the void was filled with light. A dozen duplicates of the Reckoning flared into existence, flanked by scores of smaller frigates, all hard light projections, all screaming toward the enemy with false weapon signatures. The ghosts of the fleet marched to war. Aboard the Kithar flagship, Prefect Valerius watched his tactical display explode with new contacts. Insolent fools, he snarled. They think these parlor tricks will save them, they attack with shadows. He jabbed a finger at the screen. Target their lead warship, the real one. Fire a warning shot. Let them see the price of this charade. The gunnery officer hesitated. Prefect, our sensors cannot achieve a clean lock. The energy readings are diffuse. The human decoys are mirroring our targeting scanners back at us, amplified. Then fire on the civilian ships, Valerius roared. Their doctrine of sentiment is their weakness. We will make it their grave. The blade of judgment shuddered as its colossal energy cannon fired. A beam of incandescent fury wide enough to vaporize an asteroid tore across space. But it wasn't aimed at a single ship. It was a sweeping slash intended to annihilate the entire convoy. The human response was instantaneous. The mirror lattice drones converged not on the ships, but in the path of the beam. Thousands of tiny hexagonal shields of light snapped into a single massive parabolic mirror. The Kithar beam struck the lattice. For a breathtaking second, the energy was held, contained a miniature sun blooming in the void. The mirrors glowed white-hot, several vaporizing under the strain, but they held long enough. The beam was not blocked, but redirected, its lethal energy smeared and scattered, splashing harmlessly into the dark. The convoy, rocked by the gravitational shear, but otherwise intact, pushed on. The deck of the Reckoning vibrated from the distant energy release, a tremor of survival. A reflection can be a shield. Status of the convoy. Rostova demanded her knuckles tight on her command chair's armrest. Minor damage to the Stardust Drifter's aft shielding from the energy wash, Kato reported, his eyes scanning the damage reports. No casualties. They're holding formation. They are accelerating through the gap. Solon, what is the Blade of Judgment doing? As predicted, Admiral, the AI's voice was calm amidst the tension. Its primary weapon is now in a forced recharge cycle. Its power core is diverting energy from engines and secondary batteries to compensate. It is a sluggish, vulnerable target. Rostova allowed herself a flicker of satisfaction. They took the bait. But the fight was far from over. The rest of the Kiathar flank was now moving to intercept their smaller, more nimble cruisers, firing kinetic rounds and plasma torpedoes. The mirror lattice shifted, breaking into smaller clusters, creating shimmering duplicates of the freighters, weaving a complex dance of light and shadow. The Kithar guns fired again and again, wasting ammunition on phantoms. They were shooting at their own shadows. Admiral Sharma called out, her voice strained. The lattice is losing cohesion. We've lost over 20% of the drones to kinetic impacts. They can't sustain this level of defense. The scent of stressed electronics grew stronger around her station. They don't have to sustain it, Rostova said. Her gaze fixed on the holotank. The convoy was approaching the midpoint of the Kithar line. They just have to reach the corridor. She keyed a fleet-wide channel. All ships execute maneuver lighthouse. Bring us about. We are the new target. The human warships, which had been hanging back, suddenly surged forward. Their engines flared, pushing them directly toward the enraged Kithar cruisers. It was a classic gambit, the protector drawing the fire of the wolves away from the flock. The Kithar, eager for a real target, pivoted immediately, their guns swiveling to meet the oncoming Terran ships. This was the fight they wanted, a straightforward contest of firepower. Their formation is breaking, Kato observed, a note of grim excitement in his voice. They're abandoning their disciplined line to engage us. They're leaving a hole. A hole they believe we intend to run through. Rostova murmured. Solon, begin the next phase. Start the count. They built a cage and left the door ajar. The AI's avatar pulsed once. Phase 2 initiated. The ledger is now active. On the main screen, a new data stream appeared, broadcast on all open frequencies, even civilian channels across the system. It was a simple, stark display, a list of the Kithar ships, and next to each name a running tally of every shot they fired at the ghost images of the convoy. Each kinetic round, each energy beam aimed at a non-existent ship was being meticulously recorded. Prefect Valerius saw the broadcast on his own bridge. He stared at it, uncomprehending for a moment, before his face contorted in rage. What is this mockery, another human trick? It is a public record. Prefect Rostova's voice came over the comms, cold and clear. A ledger of your recklessness. You are firing on unarmed humanitarian vessels. Or more accurately, you are firing on their ghosts because your rage has blinded your sensors. The entire system is watching you waste your fire on illusions. The public tally was more than an insult. It was a weapon of information warfare. On Kepler 186F prime, civilians in shelters watched the Kithar tally climb, each number a testament to the Imperium's brutish incompetence. The mystique of their overwhelming power was being chipped away, replaced by the image of a flailing, angry giant. A reckoning is not always paid in blood. As the human fleet engaged, it did not return fire with lethal force. Instead, the Terran ships launched salvos of sledgehammer drones. These were not explosive devices. They were incredibly dense, non-reactive projectiles designed to impact enemy shields with overwhelming kinetic energy, forcing the Kithar ships to divert massive amounts of power to their defenses. It was a physical version of a denial-of-service attack. One sledgehammer slammed into the shields of a Kithar cruiser. The ship shuddered, its lights flickering as its reactor struggled to keep the shields from collapsing. They held, but the cruiser's weapon systems went offline for 3 critical seconds. It was a blow that bruised but did not kill, an attack that cost the enemy power and pride but not lives. The convoy is clear of the primary engagement zone, Admiral Kato confirmed. The freighter icons were now safely behind the human fleet's new position. Mercy's run was a success. It was only the first step. Rostova corrected her focus, unwavering. The vibration in the deck plates had changed a deeper, more resonant thrum as the Reckoning's engines worked to hold its position against the Kithar onslaught. Now we teach them about consequences. She watched as the Kithar ships, frustrated and enraged, began to press their attack, their movements becoming more aggressive, less coordinated. They were being herded. "Solon," she asked quietly, "have they noticed the pattern yet?" "Negative, Admiral," the AI responded. "Their tactical analysis is currently focused on our fleet's defensive posture. They interpret our non-lethal response as weakness and are moving to encircle us. They do not yet realize that we are the bait, not the quarry." A subtle new icon appeared in the holotank, a ghost in the machine that only the human command could see. It was a vector, a path. This was not a retreat. It was an invitation. As the battle raged, a new mystery began to unfold. Lieutenant Sharma, tasked with monitoring the Kithar network, picked up a strange signal. "Admiral, I'm detecting a low-level encrypted command channel activating between the Kithar ships. It's not their standard battle net. It's tight beam, and it's directing their flanking ships toward a specific set of coordinates." Coordinates. Rostova asked, her eyes narrowing, where Sharma highlighted the area in the holotank. It was a seemingly empty patch of space deep behind the human fleet's current position. There was nothing there but dust and the faint light of distant stars. "It looks like they're setting a trap, Admiral. They're trying to lure us into a prearranged kill box." The low hum of her console seemed to rise in pitch with the tension. Or Rostova mused, a dangerous idea forming in her mind. They are moving to protect something. She looked at Solon. "Cross-reference those coordinates with deep system scans from our arrival. Look for anything, no matter how faint. Old minefields, cloaked platforms, anything." The AI's light pillar flickered rapidly. After a few seconds, it stabilized. "There is a 73% probability of cloaked weapon platforms at those coordinates, Admiral. They are running cold, which is why our initial scans missed them. The Kithar are not setting a new trap for us. They are falling back to a pre-existing one. Their fortress was about to become their prison." Kato swore under his breath. "They let the convoy through because they knew they could trap us afterward. The whole thing was a feint to draw us in." "Every action has a mirror," Rostova said calmly. "They presented us with an ultimatum. Now we shall present them with a dilemma." She looked at the tactical display, at the converging lines of the Kithar fleet, all unknowingly tightening a noose around their own necks. The pieces were all in place. The public ledger was broadcasting their recklessness. Their capital ship was still recharging, and their hidden ace was about to be revealed. "All ships," Rostova commanded, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "Prepare to execute maneuver Mirrored Gate. On my mark, we are going to flip this board over." The crew of the bridge exchanged determined glances. The fear was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. They had trusted the Admiral's restraint. Now they would trust her decisiveness. A deep chime echoed through the bridge. It was the 2-hour warning. The ultimatum clock was still ticking down, a constant, chilling reminder of the millions of lives hanging in the balance. But the weight of that clock had shifted. It was no longer just a threat against the humans. It was now a countdown to the Kithar's own reckoning. You cannot threaten those who hold the keys to your cage. In a medbay on the Stardust Drifter, a medic was sealing a plasma burn on a young crewman's arm. The ship had taken a glancing blow from the energy wash, and the cost was measured in scorched bulkheads and frayed nerves. Kalen stood by the viewport looking back at the distant, brilliant flashes of the battle. His ship was safe for now, but the crew knew their part was not over. They had been the bait. Soon they might have to be the anchor. He watched the Terran fleet, a small collection of lights, against an ocean of hostile crimson icons. They were so few, so outmatched. Yet they were fighting with a kind of sublime arrogance he had never witnessed a refusal to accept the enemy's terms of reality. They were not just fighting a battle. They were making an argument, and they were writing it in the stars for all to see. The Kithar fleet surged forward, their movements a clear and coordinated push to envelop and crush the Terran line. Prefect Valerius, confident that the humans were now cornered, broadcast another message, this time to his entire fleet. The enemy is weak. Their tricks have failed them. They hide behind non-lethal toys while we wield true power. Encircle them. Break them. Show them the futility of their pathetic defiance. The transmission was, of course, intercepted by the reckoning. Kato smirked. He's monologuing, Admiral, a classic sign of overconfidence. Let him, Rostova said, her gaze locked on the approaching wave of enemy ships. Pride is a gravity well. It warps judgment. She drew a slow, steadying breath, the recycled air tasting of filtered metal and anticipation. The bridge was a cocoon of focused energy, every officer at their station, every system running at peak. Solon. Are the target solutions locked? Affirmative, the AI replied. We have firing solutions for the primary power conduits on all 47 of the detected cloaked platforms. Our scalpel torpedoes are synced and ready. The scalpels were another unique aspect of human military design. They did not carry explosive warheads. Instead, their tips were comprised of a hyper-vibrating crystalline structure that upon impact would transmit a resonant frequency capable of shattering specific alloys and disabling power systems without detonating the target. They were weapons of precise surgical disarmament. They would unclaw the tiger without killing it. The Kithar flanking groups are now within the designated kill box, Sharma reported. Her voice hushed with awe at the sheer audacity of the plan. They think it's ours, but it's theirs. The heat from her console was a constant radiating warmth against her face. Rostova stood from her command chair. The subtle creak of the leather was the only sound for a moment. All eyes were on her. The weight of the ultimatum, the lives of the refugees, the fate of the colony, and the future of her fleet, it all rested on this single complex and utterly insane maneuver. She felt the pulse of her own heart, a steady beat against the thunder of the coming storm. The ledger is open, she said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. The mirrors are in place. The account is due. She looked at Kato. Commander, open the gate. Kato's fingers flew across his panel, executing mirrored gate. Instantly, the human fleet's formation shattered. It wasn't a rout. It was a planned explosive dispersal. Ships darted in vector-perfect patterns, their drives flaring as they scattered from the center of the Kithar encirclement. To the Kithar, it looked like a panic-stricken, disorganized retreat. Their commanders, smelling blood, pushed their ships harder, surging into the vacuum the humans had left behind, eager to pick off the fleeing stragglers. They rushed into the emptiness, never asking why it was there. Prefect Valerius laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed on his own bridge. They break, their discipline was a facade. Hunt them down, leave none to tell the tale of their failure. But as his ships flooded into the center of the trap, their long-range sensors, no longer jammed by the proximity of the Terran fleet, suddenly lit up with warnings. All around them, the void shimmered. The cloaking fields on dozens of massive weapon platforms disengaged simultaneously. Huge skeletal structures armed with heavy energy cannons and missile pods materialized from the darkness. The Caithar fleet had charged headfirst into a minefield they themselves had laid. Their momentum carried them deep into the heart of the killbox. Before their commanders could even process the sudden reversal, a new wave of contacts appeared on their screens. Torpedoes. Hundreds of them launched not from the fleeing human ships, but from the decoy convoy, the Mercy's Run freighters that had supposedly been a non-military humanitarian mission. The freighters had dropped their cargo pods, which were not filled with medical supplies, but with concealed launch tubes. "The trap is sprung," Kato announced, his voice tight with adrenaline. The main holotank on the Reckoning was a terrifyingly beautiful sight, a web of light and intersecting trajectories. The scalpel torpedoes, silent and swift, slammed into the cloaked weapon platforms. There were no fiery explosions. Instead, there were flashes of intense blue light as the resonant frequencies found their mark. Power conduits shattered. Targeting systems fried. One by one, the hidden platforms went dark, their cannons slumping into inert positions. In the space of 10 seconds, the Caithar's greatest tactical advantage was neutralized. They were now trapped inside their own disabled fortress. A cage of their own making now held them fast. Before Valerius could issue a single order to escape, the second part of the human plan slammed into place. The scattered Terran warships had not fled. They had repositioned. Now they formed a perfect ring outside the killbox, their weapons facing inward. The mirror lattice drones, which had been screening the convoy, now raced to the edges of the trap, forming a shimmering, inescapable wall of energy. The hunters had become the caged. Rostova's voice, amplified and broadcast across the system, cut through the chaos. "Prefect Valerius, this is Admiral Rostova. Your ultimatum has been rejected. Your fleet is contained. Your hidden weapons are disabled. You are now inside what your own tacticians would call a killbox." The main screen on the Reckoning showed Valerius's face, his arrogance shattered, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He stared at his tactical display, at the ring of human ships, at the disabled platforms, at the shimmering energy wall of the mirror lattice. He was surrounded, outmaneuvered, and utterly defeated without having lost a single ship. "You have a new choice now," Rostova continued, her voice as unyielding as iron. "The first is to stand down your fleet power, down your weapons, and surrender your command for trial on charges of threatening a civilian population. The second is to discover the true purpose of the mirror lattice. The mirror could do more than just reflect." On the Caithar bridge, a tactical officer turned to Valerius, his face pale. "Sir, the human lattice. It's reconfiguring. The drones are aligning into a concave energy reflector. All of them pointed at us." Valerius understood instantly. It was a weapon of unimaginable cruelty, a passive instrument of death. The humans wouldn't have to fire a single shot. They would simply use the lattice to collect the ambient energy from the system's star, focusing it into a single concentrated beam of searing light and heat. They would cook his fleet inside their armored hulls. "This is your new ultimatum," Prefect Rostova's voice concluded, devoid of all emotion, save for the cold, hard finality of her words. "A choice between a ledger and a crucible. You have 60 seconds to decide. The clock is running." On the main screen, the crimson timer of the Caithar's original ultimatum vanished. In its place, a new one appeared, stark white against the black of space. It began at 000059. It was a human clock, and it was counting down to a promise. The air on the Reckoning's bridge was a vacuum, a void of sound filled only by the soft, inexorable chime of the descending clock. Each number was a hammer blow against the shield of Prefect Valerius's pride. His face on the main viewer was a canvas of disbelief warring with dawning horror. He was trapped not by walls of steel, but by the elegant, inescapable geometry of his own failed doctrine. His fleet, moments ago, an instrument of terror, was now a collection of helpless targets in a cage of light. On the Caithar command deck, panic was a contagion. Officers shouted conflicting reports, their disciplined composure shattering. "Sir, their energy routings are climbing," one yelled. "The lattice is focusing the star's radiation. Hull temperature is already rising by 2 degrees," another slammed his fist on a console. "We can't break through their formation, and our own platforms block our retreat. We are boxed in." Valerius stared at the countdown, his mind racing. Surrender was unthinkable, a stain on his lineage that would never wash away. But annihilation was absolute. The humans weren't bluffing. Their quiet, methodical dismantling of his strategy spoke to a certainty he could no longer deny. The cool logic of their actions was more terrifying than any passionate threat. He was not being faced by a warrior. He was being audited by an executioner. A promise made of light is the hardest to break. Prefect, his second in command, a grizzled officer named Goran, grabbed his arm. "Your pride is not worth 50,000 Caithar lives. They have beaten us. The doctrine has failed. Give the order." The timer showed 00:15. The hum on Rostova's bridge deepened as the mirror lattice began to draw and channel stellar energy in earnest. A faint golden shimmer began to coalesce in the void at the center of the Caithar fleet, the focal point of the nascent beam. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone from the straining power conduits. "They are not killing us," Valerius whispered, the revelation dawning on him. "They are forcing us to kill ourselves by refusing to yield." He looked at Goran, his eyes reflecting the stark reality of his defeat. He had built a career on the principle of the ultimatum, the belief that the will to destroy was the ultimate form of power. Now he was staring into its perfect, horrifying reflection. The ultimatum had always been a mirror. With a choked gasp as the timer hit 00:004, Valerius slumped. "Broadcast our surrender," he croaked the words tasting like ash. "Power down all weapon systems. Stand down the fleet." The crimson icons of the Caithar fleet in the holotank flickered one by one, turning a neutral blue. The golden shimmer in the void vanished as the mirror lattice instantly ceased its focusing sequence. The countdown clock on the main screen stopped at 00:02, its final stark digits a monument to the precipice. A collective sigh of relief, sharp and ragged, swept across the Reckoning's bridge. "They've complied." Admiral Cato said, his voice strained but steady. "All ships are powering down weapons and broadcasting surrender codes. Keep the lattice in place." Rostova ordered, her posture not relaxing by a single millimeter. "Maintain a full cordon. Solon, verify their compliance. Check for any hidden power spikes, any encrypted transmissions, any deviation whatsoever." This was the most dangerous moment, the instant after victory, when vigilance could falter. The deck plates beneath her feet still hummed with combat-ready power. "Compliance appears genuine across 99% of the captured fleet," Solon reported after a moment. "However, I am detecting a discrepancy. One ship, the cruiser Vindicator, is not fully powering down its drive core. It is attempting to mask the energy signature as a life support malfunction. A single lie can poison a truce." Rostova's eyes narrowed. "Where is the Vindicator?" Sharma highlighted the vessel in the tank. It was near the rear of the Kethar formation, partially obscured by the bulk of a battleship. They're trying to look inert, Admiral, but their drive is spooling, not spinning down. And I have something else. A tight beam signal originating from the Vindicator. It's a single encoded command packet. It was sent just before the surrender, to where I can't trace the recipient. The signal was strange. It didn't travel to a location. It seems to have unlocked something at a location. A preset automated system. Sharma's brow furrowed, the glare from her console reflecting in her wide eyes. A new urgent mystery was unfolding in the ashes of the old one. A chill ran down Rostova's spine. A dead man's switch. Valerius had lost, but his doctrine had one last spiteful move to make. Solon scanned the system for any new energy signatures, no matter how small. Specifically, look for kinetic launch trajectories originating from orbital debris fields or asteroid clusters. Something fast, something small, something automated. The seconds stretched into an eternity. The bridge crew held their breath, the quiet hum of the ship, the only sound. Then Solon's voice cut through the silence, sharp and urgent. Trajectory detected. A single cloaked kinetic rod launched from a hidden automated platform in the system's outer asteroid belt. It is on a direct intercept course with Kepler 186F'. A vengeful ghost was thrown from the dark. Impact time. Rostova snapped. 17 minutes, Solon stated. The projectile is a world-breaker class rod. Impact will be an extinction-level event. Kato swore, his brief moment of relief turning to cold fury. They lost, and they're still trying to murder the planet out of spite. It's not spite, Commander Rostova said, her mind already leaping ahead, processing the new horrific calculus. It's doctrine. If the ultimatum fails, the punishment must be delivered. It ensures the threat remains potent for the next world they target. She turned to her tactical officer. Our interceptor's too slow. Kato replied, his fingers flying across his console, confirming the grim reality. The rod is already at maximum velocity. It's too small and too fast for our torpedoes to achieve a lock, and our ships can't possibly get into position for a direct energy assault in time. The hope on the bridge evaporated, replaced by the iron tang of impending failure. We have one asset. That is fast enough. Rostova said quietly, her gaze turning to the shimmering wall of light still caging the Kethar fleet. The mirror lattice. Sharma looked up, her expression a mix of confusion and dawning realization. Admiral, the lattice can't move that fast. The drones have limited fuel. They can't cross the system in 17 minutes. The drones don't have to, Rostova countered. Only their light does. They would forge a spear from sunlight. Inside the planetary governor's bunker on Kepler 186F', Ilara and her father watched the public display. The image of the Kethar fleet turning blue had sent a wave of ecstatic celebration through the sheltered population. People were cheering, hugging, crying with relief. But then a new warning had flashed onto the screen, an alert of a planetary impact threat, its trajectory a stark red line pointed directly at them. The cheering died, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. Her father pulled her close, his body trembling. He looked at the screen, at the new countdown, this one showing less than a quarter of an hour. He had allowed himself to hope, and that hope now felt like the cruelest betrayal. He looked back down at his daughter, her wide eyes questioning, and he found he had no more comforting words to offer. The silence of the enemy had been broken by the scream of their final posthumous vengeance. Solon, need a solution, Rostova commanded, her voice a blade cutting through the tension on the Reckoning's bridge. We need to use the lattice to intercept that rod, Plot a firing solution, now. The AI's avatar pulsed with an intensity she had never seen before. The concept is theoretically sound, Admiral. The lattice can reconfigure into a system-scale phased array mirror, collecting and focusing the star's energy into a coherent beam. However, the required precision is astronomical. We would need to hit a target the size of a shuttle, moving at over 10,000 kilometers per second, from a distance of 3 million kilometers. I'm aware of the difficulty, Solon Rostova said, her voice dangerously calm. Give me the probability of success. Calculating. The probability of a successful intercept vaporizing the rod before it enters the upper atmosphere is 38.6%. A low murmur went through the bridge crew. It was a terrible number. However, Solon continued, there is a secondary option. We can alter the beam's frequency to generate a powerful kinetic push instead of a thermal blast. The probability of successfully deflecting the rod onto a new trajectory that misses the planet is 81.2%. A push is safer than a prayer. The problem, Solon added, is the cost. To generate a beam of that power and precision requires diverting nearly all of our fleet's available energy to the lattice drones. We would have to lower our shields and power down our own weapons. For the duration of the firing sequence, approximately 2 minutes, we would be completely defenseless. Kato's head snapped up. Defenseless, Admiral. We're sitting in the middle of a defeated but still functional enemy fleet. The moment our shields drop, they could power up and tear us to pieces. That is the dilemma, Commander Rostova agreed. The Kithar on the Vindicator counted on it. They knew we would detect the rod. They are betting that we will choose to save ourselves rather than the planet. They are forcing us to make the same cold, cynical calculation they would make. The conflict triangle was laid bare. Rostova's moral line demanded she protect the planet. Solon's calculus showed the only way to do so carried an immense risk to the fleet. The antagonist's doctrine, even in defeat, had laid one final venomous trap designed to prove that in the end, everyone chooses self-preservation over sentiment. Their doctrine's last stand was a test of character. They are wrong, Rostova declared, her voice ringing with absolute conviction. The low thrum of the inertial dampeners seemed to fall silent, as if the ship itself was listening. They mistake our capacity for mercy for a lack of resolve. They believe our ledger has a column for acceptable losses. It does not. She looked around the bridge, meeting the eyes of her officers. We will save the planet, and we will trust the lesson we have just taught. She opened a channel not just to her fleet, but to the powered-down Kithar ships as well. Her voice, calm and measured, filled the command decks of allies and enemies alike. This is Admiral Rostova. As you know, a kinetic projectile has been launched at Kepler 186F', a final cowardly act triggered by the cruiser Vindicator. We are the only ones who can stop it. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. To do so, we must divert all power to the mirror lattice. We will be lowering our shields and disabling our weapons. We will be utterly defenseless before you. A tense silence filled the comms. Prefect Valerius surrendered, she continued. He gave his word. His doctrine of ultimatums has failed. Now comes a new test, a test of honor. We are about to show you that we trust your word even after your subordinate broke his. We are betting the lives of our crews on the belief that the Kithar are more than their failed doctrine. We believe you are warriors, not murderers. She was offering them a chance to rewrite their own ledger. On the Kithar flagship, Valerius and his crew listened, stunned. The humans were voluntarily making themselves vulnerable. After everything, it was insane. It was magnificent. Goran looked at his prefect, his expression unreadable. They are giving us a choice, sir. To be the monsters the doctrine made us, or to be the soldiers we were before. Rostova's voice concluded the transmission. The choice is yours. We will begin the firing sequence in 90 seconds. She cut the channel. Kato stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief. Admiral, that's the biggest gamble I've ever seen. What if they're not honorable? What if they're just waiting for the chance? Then they will have taught us a lesson. Rostova replied softly. But today, we are the teachers. It's time for the final exam. She turned to her helm officer. Bring us about. I want the reckoning positioned between the Kithar fleet and the lattice. If they fire, they hit us first. The shield must be willing to break. The fleet began to move a slow, deliberate ballet of trust and consequence. The human ships lowered their shields, their defensive energy fields, collapsing with a soft electronic sigh that was audible over the internal comms. The ready status lights on the weapon consoles flickered from green to gray. They were naked in the void. The timer for the rod's impact read 12 minutes. The mirror lattice drones, tens of thousands of them, began their intricate dance. They flowed like liquid silver, forming a vast concave dish miles across its surface, aimed at the distant, brilliant sun. The light from the star began to gather on its mirrored surface, a growing intensity that was visible even from the bridge of the reckoning. On the Kythar ships, there was chaos. Some commanders loyal to the old ways screamed orders to power up weapons to seize the unbelievable opportunity for revenge. Others argued against it, shouting that this was a test, that to fire now would be the ultimate act of dishonor, proving the humans right about their barbarism. The fate of 2 fleets and a planet hung in the balance of this internal struggle. Valerius stood silent amidst the shouting on his bridge. He watched the small human fleet deliberately expose itself, placing its faith not in shields or guns, but in his word. The very concept was alien to him. His entire life had been governed by the principle of overwhelming force. He looked at the main screen at the human flagship, positioning itself as a shield for the others, and he felt something he hadn't felt since he was a young cadet: shame. A debt of honor must be paid. Silence, he roared, his voice cutting through the cacophony. His officers fell quiet. Any commander who attempts to power up a weapon system will be arrested and spaced for treason. We gave our word. We will keep it. Lock down all systems. Transmit our compliance to the humans. Now. A signal went from the Kythar flagship to the reckoning. Solon's voice filled the bridge. Admiral, I am receiving a fleet-wide transmission from Prefect Valerius. It is a stand-down order enforced by his command codes. He is honoring the surrender. Kato let out a breath. He didn't realize he'd been holding the tension draining from his shoulders. He looked at Rostova with a newfound sense of awe. She had not only defeated an enemy, she had changed him. The lattice is at full power, Admiral Sharma reported, her voice trembling slightly. The heat on the bridge was rising, a tangible manifestation of the immense power being channeled just outside their hull. We are ready to fire on your command. The countdown showed 2 minutes to impact. The kinetic rod was now visible on the main screen, a tiny lethal spark screaming toward the blue planet. Solon, final trajectory lock, Rostova commanded. Lock confirmed. Firing solution is stable. Rostova's gaze was fixed on the screen, her face illuminated by the glow of the holotank. This was the culmination of it all. Every calculation, every gamble, every lesson. It all came down to a single beam of light. Open the ledger one last time, she said, her voice clear and strong. And fire. They would turn back the night with a sword of dawn. From the heart of the great mirror, a beam of pure, coherent energy erupted. It was not a violent, explosive blast. but a silent, impossibly straight line of golden light, a solid spear of kinetic force made manifest. It crossed the vast distance to the incoming rod in an instant. The beam struck the projectile not with heat, but with a colossal wave of focused pressure. On the main screen, the trajectory of the tiny spark wavered. For a heart-stopping second, it seemed to resist to hold its deadly course. But the pressure was relentless. The red line of its projected path bent, curving away from the planet, pushed onto a new, harmless vector that would see it slingshot around the gas giant on the system's edge and out into the deep void. The beam held for another 5 seconds, ensuring the deflection was permanent. Then it vanished. The mirror lattice broke formation, its glow fading as the drones went into a low power state. Silence descended once more upon the bridge of the reckoning. It was broken by Lieutenant Sharma. Confirmed, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The projectile has been deflected. Its new trajectory is no threat. The planet is safe. A wave of cheers erupted across the bridge, a spontaneous, joyous explosion of relief that shattered the disciplined tension. Officers clapped each other on the back, their faces split with grins. Kato looked at Rostova and simply nodded the gesture, conveying a depth of respect that words could not. The deepest victories are the ones that build instead of break. In the aftermath, the surrender was formalized. The Kithar fleet, under Valerius's orders, powered down completely and allowed Terran prize crews to come aboard. The process was tense but professional. There were no celebrations, no taunts. The human crews moved with a quiet efficiency that was more intimidating than any overt display of power. They were not conquerors. They were auditors closing out an account. A week later, Rostova sat in her ready room with a high-ranking Kithar emissary, a member of a diplomatic caste sent to negotiate the fleet's return. The emissary was regal and composed, but the shame of the Imperium's defeat was evident in her eyes. "The Imperium does not understand," the emissary said, her voice a low murmur. "You had our fleet, our prefect, at your mercy. You could have destroyed them. You could have held them for ransom. Instead, you offer them back to us in exchange for a treaty." "We don't want your ships, emissary," Rostova replied, her hands steepled before her. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the ship's life support. "We want your doctrine. We want it dismantled. The practice of issuing ultimatums against civilian populations is to be outlawed, its use stricken from your military code. This will be verified by impartial observers." The emissary was silent for a long moment. "And what of the asylum seekers? The catalyst for this entire conflict. You have not asked what makes them so important." "We didn't need to," Rostova said. "During the processing of the refugees, they came to us. They told us their story." She leaned forward slightly. "They are the descendants of the Kithar's original archivists. They carry the true history of your Imperium. A record showing that your ruling caste did not achieve power through glorious conquest as your official histories claim, but through a treacherous act of regicide against a more peaceful dynasty. That is what you were willing to glass a planet to conceal. A lie. The truth is the one debt that cannot be erased." The emissary's composure finally cracked. A flicker of fear crossed her features. "You could destabilize our entire government with that information. We could," Rostova agreed. "But we won't. That is your history to reckon with, not ours to weaponize. Our demand is not for revolution, but for reform. The ledger we have created here is not about punishment. It is about establishing a new precedent." Her words hung in the air, a statement of principle that was as powerful as any weapon. The institutional consequence was clear. The Rostova Doctrine, as it would come to be known, was formally entered into the public record of interstellar law, a permanent prohibition against the weaponization of civilian lives. The Caithar Imperium, humbled and exposed, had no choice but to ratify it. The cost of victory had been tangible. The Reckoning's power core was strained to the breaking point from the lattice maneuver, requiring a month of repairs. Several crew members, including Lieutenant Sharma, had suffered severe nerve strain from pushing their systems so far beyond their designed limits. But they had held the line. They had paid the price not in blood, but in energy and will. Weeks later, the Reckoning prepared to leave the Kepler system. The last of the former Caithar warships, now crewed by their own people, had departed their journey home, a quiet parade of shame. On the bridge, Rostova stood with Solon watching Kepler 186F', now a vibrant, peaceful blue, turn serenely in the void. The calculus of this engagement was difficult to model, Solon's voice stated from its pillar of light. Your final gambit, trusting the honor of a defeated enemy, had a success probability of only 27%. Logically, it should have failed. Some things can't be measured in probabilities, Solon Rostova replied, a faint smile on her lips. Honor, mercy, the courage to trust. They aren't variables in an equation. They are the constants that hold us together. The ledger we keep is not just a record of debts owed by others. It is a mirror to ensure we never forget the cost of our own humanity. She watched as the last of the mirror lattice drones completed their return. Their silver forms slotting neatly into the ship's deployment bays, their mission lights dimming from active blue to a dormant, peaceful white. This is how we teach. Not with the fist, but with the open hand that shows them the fist it could have made. This is how we win. Not by breaking our enemies, but by forcing them to see the better version of themselves and challenging them to become it. The universe is a dark and violent place, but it does not have to be. We bring the light not of our weapons, but of our example. And we hold the line not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has forgotten how. We are the mirror, and we are the reckoning.